What's up everyone, welcome back to another video. In this video we'll be working on the Toyota Yaris, installing some brand new parts as well as replacing some old worn out parts on the Yaris. So as I said, we're installing some brand new parts on the Yaris. A lot of it has to do with suspension as well as replacing some old worn out parts. So one of the new parts that I'll be installing today is the super rigid collar kit for the Toyota Yaris. This is from the guys over at the RZCrew garage overseas, and I bought this online, and this is for both the front and the rear of the Yaris. I'll go ahead and link the product description below if you guys are interested in this, but this is one of the things we'll be installing on the Yaris today. Another thing we'll be installing is replacing the Endlinks sway bars on my Yaris. The ones I currently have on are from BC Racing, but specifically the passenger side is actually kind of loose, and so I got these replacement parts from SuperPro. These are adjustable, and we'll be replacing the Endlinks on the Yaris with these. And finally, we'll be replacing the old worn out bushings, the rubber bushings for the sway bar, with some brand new ones from Toyota. Just got two of these brand new, so we'll also go ahead and replace that while we're kind of in this area of the car. And the whole reason why I'm doing this right now is actually because the passenger side of the Yaris, specifically the damper coilovers, are actually leaking right now. And so I actually bought a set of brand new dampers from BC Racing along with a bunch of other new replacement pieces, just to kind of refresh and update the front suspension of the car. It's been a while since I've worked on these coilovers, so it's good that I got some new pieces so we can replace both sides. So that's also why I'm doing a lot of these suspension works and upgrades now, because I'm kind of in the area for a lot of these things. So we're going to go ahead and start off with replacing the sway bar bushings with some OEM ones. So we're going to go ahead, jump in and get started. As you can kind of see, this is the bushing right here for the sway bar link, and it's kind of, these are the OEM bushings, and they're obviously rubber, and they're pretty old. I haven't changed these since owning the car brand new, so it's time to go ahead and replace them. So in order for us to get access to the sway bar bushings, we're gonna have to loosen the whole entire subframe. So first thing I'm gonna do is actually loosen the end link here that's connected to the sway bar. This is also connected to the coilover right here. So this is a 19 millimeter right here. So number 6 Allen. So close. There we go. Alright, so that's loose. Now that the end links are disconnected from the sway bar, as you can see, it's nice and loose. We can go ahead and loosen the subframe. First thing we need to do is remove the Cusco brace that I have installed. So I just gotta break loose this bolt and the bolt back here on both sides. Alright, now we're gonna remove the other subframe bolts. So there's two nuts on this subframe, specifically this guy right here. This is actually tied to the steering rack, so I believe you need to remove and loosen this one up so you can drop the subframe this way. So there we go. Only two more bolts left, and it's this one that goes all the way up here. So okay, just gotta do the other side. You can see the subframe dropping a little bit, so we'll slowly loosen everything and just kind of be careful not to drop anything. got my flashlight shining on it. So as you can see, that's the bushing right there. You can see it's kind of old and worn out, somewhat cracking a little bit. Yeah, I finally got the subframe kind of all nice and disconnected. The hardest part was actually getting the steering rack disconnected. The bolt kept falling into the subframe, but yeah, pretty much got everything out. So basically there's 3 bolts. All right, so there's one back here, one right here that goes through the back of the control arm, and then the other one is right up here. It goes right up inside this channel over here. So those are the 3 connections for the subframe. The one I was worried about is actually the one right where the jack is. There's that center bolt that kind of bolts to the engine and everything. That doesn't need to be disconnected. So as you can see, this whole subframe kind of pivots around that, so everything's kind of loose. Disconnect the 2 bolts. So you can see there's one right in the front, right there, and then another one right in the rear. There's a clamp basically that just kind of bolts. It just kind of goes up and over. That holds the bushing in place. So we'll go ahead and do that now. I got the bracket out. I'm just gonna go ahead and do the passenger side real quick, and then we'll try to get the old bushing out. Okay, so these are the old bushings. As you can see, they're really heavily warped and just kind of used and abused over the years. As you can see, kind of the inner circle is not really kind of, yeah, this thing is already like, it's badly used, right? It's old and it's a rubber piece, so it's bound to just kind of deteriorate over time and kind of warp over time. So yeah, so here are the brand new pieces. Obviously there's 2 of them, obviously they're the same thing. So I'm just gonna go ahead and quickly open this up. So here you go, brand new piece, right? Looks nice and new compared to the old one. You can kind of see. So, yep. So, yeah, even like compared to this one too, right? You can just kind of see everything is just better, brand new, but you can see this one's like badly warped. Like, look at that. So, yep. So we're gonna go ahead and install the brand new bushing. So just gotta keep in mind the orientation has to be, the cutout has to be facing forward, and this bottom piece and then this angle is facing backwards. Be to slide it in from the rear. Just gotta slide it into place. Just kind of open it and then get it over the bar, or between the bar, I guess. I just gotta slide it. There we go. Yep. So got one side in. The bracket, I actually went ahead and painted it because it's kind of rusting in some spots. So I just took a spray paint, painted around the edges where it was rusting out and everything. So now we can go ahead and install it. There we go. We just take our bolt, which I cleaned. Just gonna apply some Loctite Red to it real quick, just to the ends, and then we'll go ahead and install it. So I'm gonna quickly go and do the passenger side real quick, same exact process. And then we'll go ahead and start tightening down the bolts that hold the bushing into the subframe. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and torque these down to 35 foot-pounds. I have my torque wrench with a crow's feet on the end, and it's set to 35, which isn't much. Usually it's kind of hand tight, but you know, just to be sure. Okay, that's 35. Okay, that's 35. So, all good. Now that we installed the brand new bushings for the sway bar, I'm gonna go ahead and reattach the steering rack to the subframe. So as you can see, this one's already kind of sticking down with this bolt. I just gotta do the other side. So just gotta align the steering rack, and the bolt should fall right into place. There we go. So now we just gotta put the nuts back on. All right, 71. 71 foot-pounds. All right. All right, so next up on the list is the super rigid collar kit. So this one, if you guys don't know what this is, it basically aligns the bolt to the chassis because the subframe typically has like a bigger hole on the subframe, and then there's a hole on the top in the chassis, and the bolt goes through the two. And then usually because the bolt on the subframe is so big, there's a lot of play when the subframe is mounted. And so what the collars are designed to do is basically take up that extra slack inside the subframe hole and then align the bolt so that the bolt is centered with the chassis. And so that's what these are meant to do. If you guys want to read more about it or learn more about it, you can go ahead and check out the spoon rigid collar kits. The spoons are actually the ones that are made for the Hondas, and they're very popular with a lot of the Hondas. So these are very similar to that. So go ahead and check those out if you're interested in more about how these specifically work. But just for the Yaris, these are the only ones that I know of that are made for it. So like I said before, these are super rigid, and these are by the guys over at RZCrew Garage. And so, yeah, so you can see it's for the Toyota Vios or the Yaris, and it comprises of both the front and the rear. So the front has 3 bolts for the subframe. It's 1, 2, 3, and then there's one on the rear, and we'll also do the rear as well. So on the back there is a instruction manual. Here's the instructions for the rigid collars. As you can see, right, Toyota Vios, Yaris Vitz. These are the instructions. And then these are the 4 different collars that come with it. So rings A, B, and C go for the front, as you can see here, and then ring D goes for the rear. So if we look closely at rings A, B, and C, right, A, B, C, they correspond to different portions of the subframe. So ring A goes to the forwardmost subframe mount, which is the one that it's like all the way up, the highest point. Ring B actually goes in the middle, so that's actually where the control arm mounts on the rear. And then ring C is actually the rearmost subframe mount. And then ring D actually goes in the rear, and when we get to the rear, I'll go ahead and show you guys where that is. But basically this kind of shows you where the ring sits relative to the chassis and the subframe and the bolt. The purpose of these collars are meant to take up the slack in the subframe. As you can see, there's the bolt running up, and as you can see, the subframe is typically bigger than what the chassis hole for the bolt that gets fastened to. And so the collars basically take up that inside slack and that space, and basically self-centers and self-aligns the bolt so that it's all straight and together. Then for ring A, it sits between the chassis and the subframe, and then the bolt goes in. And then for ring B, it goes actually on the bottom on the subframe, and then the bolt fastens everything together. And then same thing for ring C, it gets fastened on the bottom and put right between the bolt and the subframe before getting bolted together. So we'll go ahead and start with ring A, then we'll go and do ring C, and then we'll do ring B last, because I believe there might be an issue with ring B, and I'll kind of show you guys what I mean when I get to it. So we'll go ahead and take this out, as you can see. So these are just held in, but I believe this is ring A. Ring A is kind of thin, but it has spacers on both sides, right? So as you can see, there's a bigger side and a smaller side for this one, for ring A. This is ring B. This is ring C right here. And then ring D, when we get to the rear, we'll talk about the rears. But we'll start off with ring A. Right here, as you can see, I zoomed in, right there, right around that area is where, so that portion right there is where ring A of the rigid collar will be going. So you can see there is a smaller side and then there's a bigger side. Like the flange is a lot bigger, right? And then there's a smaller side here. So this is the bolt that goes in that section of the subframe, right? If we line it up, right, it kind of centers the bolt a lot more, right? You can see on the bottom that there is such a bigger hole. Let's see if I can angle my light better. Here I have the bolt for the subframe, right? So this is the forwardmost subframe. Hopefully this shows up on camera. But as you guys can see, right, the subframe hole is a lot bigger than the hole for the bolt. So if we were to quickly install this, right, so the bolt is already in, that's straight, but the subframe itself has so much play, as you can see, right? So I'm gonna remove the bolt real quick. I'm gonna install the rigid collar. So the big side goes on the bottom. There you go. Okay. Okay. So the only thing you just have to be careful about with these are because the metal on the front side is so thin, it's easy to kind of crush on itself. So it's gonna be a little hard for me, but you just gotta watch out. So we'll try to install these again. Okay. I mean that, there's so much less play now. Like that's so much better, like way better. Next one we're gonna do is the passenger side real quick. it's in. The next one is this, the one in the rear. So this is the ring C. So as you can see, the difference in the hole size, right? So I just want to quickly show you guys here to slip this in this way. It'll obviously fill up the gap like that. And so if we take the bolt as well and just kind of showcase, it's a lot, fills in the gap a lot more. But according to this one, this ring goes on the outside like this. So it actually goes this way, and then it goes into the subframe here. So this one might be a little hard because I got to do this probably with the Cusco bar installed. So this might be a little hard. While I'm still here underneath the car, I just wanted to quickly show what ring B why I can't install this one. It's because it sits right here. And so if you guys remember, I'd installed the SuperPro polyurethane bushings on the control arms. And so typically, because of this, the height of this collar right here, it should go up inside. But because of the SuperPro polyurethane bushings and the way they're designed, I simply can't install these in. I can't even go from the inside because these bushings take up the entirety of the control arm. So yeah, unfortunately I won't be able to line up this one and install this collar, but I think the other two are more important, mainly because they mount directly to the chassis, and then this last one is it controls both the control arm and the chassis as well. But I feel like because I have 2 points already mounted to the chassis, I think it should be sufficient enough to keep it relatively straight. So it's the next day. I wasn't able to finish installing the rest of the collars onto the car. So next day, and I tried going in real quick just to try and install the rest, but I'm having a little hard time trying to install it, and also because I need to install the Cusco front brace, and a lot of it requires using the bolt that goes through the brace into the chassis, and so it requires a lot of like fiddling around with the collars and the bolts and the brace and everything, trying to get everything to line up, because I have not only the 4 points on the brace that I need to worry about aligning, but also the collars on 2 of the points as well. So it's a little hard to try and maneuver around, and I think the subframe is not allowing me or giving me enough room, and I think it has to do with the suspension, specifically the coilovers, because there's not a lot of playroom in the coilovers. So I mean, all the bolts are loose on the subframe, but just some of them just won't line up correctly. Specifically like this one back here, the one down here that also ties into the back of the Cusco brace, it won't allow the bolt to line up correctly and align with the collar. So what I'm thinking is maybe I'll try and loosen up the coilovers just on the top portion, just to kind of loosen the top half so the top can move, and then see if that will give me maybe a little bit more playroom with the subframe so I can get everything aligned and then put the brace back in. Okay. All right, guys. So yeah, I finally was able to get everything kind of lined up for the subframe, and all the bolts were able to go in. The one that was giving me the most issues was the one right here, back here. For whatever reason, the bolt just wouldn't line up with the subframe, and I feel like maybe the collars might have been affecting it, but you know, the more I think about it, the more I think maybe the frame itself is actually not exactly square, um, because I kind of understand now why the holes are so huge on the subframe, is because the alignment of it, trying to get everything aligned perfectly, is very tedious. And for someone like me who does not have access to like a lift, yeah, it makes it really hard to align it. So but I somehow managed to get all the collars to line up good, and the bolts are able to go in. So I'm just gonna go ahead and tighten all these up, torque it down and everything. And then we'll move on to the rear and work on the rear collars. Those ones should be a lot easier. It's just one bolt on each side of the car, and it just simple bolt. It's a lot easy to get to, and hopefully that one goes a lot better, because the front subframe is, this was quite a bit of work to get everything to line up, specifically with the collars. If I didn't have the collars, it would be a lot easier, because you know the amount of play with those holes on the subframe is so much bigger, and you can move the subframe a lot just so everything lines up. But when you insert the collars to take up that extra slack in the holes, it really limits your tolerance of what you can use or what you can play with to move the subframe around. So just kind of a word of caution: if you decide to put these collars on, make sure you have like access to a lift, you have someone else that can help you, because I feel like it is doable. I've just done it myself, but it took way longer than it needed to take to get this to where it is now. It's a little hard to show the collars installed because they're sandwiched in place with a lot of things, and a lot of the bolts cover it as well. So, but you guys kind of saw the process of how everything gets lined up and put in place. So, yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead, torque up everything, and then move on to the rears. So, 52. $72. Okay, so my mic died for some odd reason during this portion of the video when I was recording, so I'm just doing a voiceover real quick. But here we are looking at the back of the car, the rear suspension, and we are installing ring D. As you can see here, ring D has this kind of cup looking shape, and so based on the diagram that sits on the outside of the chassis and right between the bolt and the chassis. And so it sits right here, as you can see, right on the outside behind the bolt. So first thing you want to do is try and jack up the rear of the suspension arm just a little bit to try and take some weight off of the suspension from hanging. And then using a breaker bar, basically break loose the bolt, and then just loosen it up using ratchet. And you might need to use another jack to help maneuver the arm a little bit, because the bolt might get stuck, as you can see. So just using another jack and then just kind of maneuvering it will get the bolt loose. And so as you can see, this is the bolt, and then as you insert the collar, it takes up a lot of the slack, and then it sits on the chassis side, as you can see here. And so it eliminates a lot of the play of the bigger hole on the chassis side. As you can see, when I put the bolt in, there's a lot of extra play. But when you insert it into the collar, there's a little bit less play in the collar. So after applying some anti-seize to the bolt, we just basically reinstall the bolt into the chassis, just making sure to align the collar to the respective hole, making sure that everything lines up. And you might need the help of the other jacks, as I mentioned, to try and maneuver the bolt into place. And then basically just tighten down the bolt, and once it's tightened down, you torque it down to 67 foot-pounds, and that's pretty much it. And then after that, I can move over to the passenger side of the vehicle, where we repeat the same process for the passenger side collar. So we finished installing the super rigid collars on the subframe on the front and the rear of the car. And the next thing we're going to do is install these new sway bar Endlinks for the Yaris from SuperPro. But before I do that, I gotta redo the BC coilovers, specifically the passenger side, because it's leaking. So I got a bunch of new parts, obviously a new damper for everything, new bump stops, new boots and everything. Also some new hardware for the top and everything. So yeah, just gonna do a quick time lapse of this portion before I go in and install these. All right, guys. So I went ahead and installed the driver's side coilovers after rebuilding it and everything with brand new shocks and everything. And I was gonna go and install the SuperPro adjustable end links for the sway bar. It turns out these are actually really long. Like, this is the BC Racing version that connects the coilovers from up here to the sway bar down here. This is what BC Racing originally supplied me with when I initially got the coilovers, but I was thinking, oh, maybe I can get some adjustable end links, mainly because when you have the sway bar connected to the coilovers, you don't want these ball joints right here. And these ones are a little hard, but basically you kind of want your ball joints to be kind of straight for the most part on both top and bottom when you're mounting it. But I noticed with these ones, they were a little like off. I think they were like this a little bit. Yeah. And so I thought maybe I could get some adjustable ones. And so I went ahead and shopped for some, and I found that SuperPro sold for the Yaris, but it turns out these are way too long and I can't really use them because then the end links would be like in the far position. Man, these are really stiff. I'll just demonstrate with this, but imagine this is the SuperPro one and the end links would be like, it would be like this essentially. It would be mounted like this, right? It would be extremes, and that's also not ideal. So I can't really use these. I was hoping to use these, but looks like I can't. I'll need to double check with SuperPro, and I'll need to ensure that they sent me the right one. According to the website, it said it's applicable for Toyota Yaris, but apparently it's too long. So for now, I'm just gonna go ahead and reinstall the original BC Racing one, although I do need to replace these anyways because they are not, especially this passenger side, the top one is not allowing me to torque down the nut because these holes, or these end links, they have a hex socket head, and usually you would put like an Allen, whatever in here, or a socket, and you would use this to hold it while you tighten down the nut right inside here. Head of the hex one on the passenger side is actually starting to round out, so I will probably need to order some end links tonight because I need to get this car back together because I have an upcoming race and I still need to do an alignment on this car. And given that I took apart this whole thing, I need to ensure that the car is tracking straight. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. There's nothing much left. I can't really go over the SuperPro ones, so if I do end up getting replacement ones and proper ones, I will make a separate video installing them. But if not, then just know that I didn't find any applicable or replacement ones from SuperPro. So yeah, but as far as everything else goes, you guys saw installation of the collars. Those were pretty simple. Replaced the sway bar bushings on the front and just had to kind of drop the whole subframe, and that was kind of a whole issue in itself. But hopefully the collars were the most informative and helpful part of this video. Coilovers is pretty much the same, just kind of doing replacement of parts. So yeah, if you guys have any suggestions or comments, please let me know and leave them down in the comment section below. I'll try to leave links for all of these parts that I bought in the description as well. But that's pretty much it, guys. We'll just kind of wrap it up here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Shoots.